Lots of people have told me about this Hat Man, often referring to him when I talk about my own hallucinations. He sounds like the Hat Man. Have you heard about the Hat Man? Maybe it's the Hat Man. It got me interested in figuring out what everyone was saying about this entity. So I did some research only to come to a dead end. Everyone's experience with the Hat Man is the same. He just watches, doesn't talk or touch the person, no face but sometimes has eyes. He's just there. It seems silly to me that he just watches. Especially when my hallucination actually interacts with me, he attacks in a way. What makes things worse is that I don't believe in the paranormal. For some reason, not believing in it helps prevent me from experiencing what others have dealt with. It's a blessing, but also a curse from this experience. He wants me to believe. The first time I saw him was while I was getting ready for school. I was a freshman in high school and actually had a good year, compared to the previous year in junior high. A group of old friends decided to torment me at the end of the year, all because I didn't want to follow along with what the ringleader had to say. I was lonely and desperate, made some imaginary friends along the way to cope. That's something I regret. Around this time of the year, the sun rose later and set earlier in the day. Though the dark never bothered me, it gave me an eerie feeling every time I woke up. I had a routine. Wake up, change out of my pajamas, go downstairs for breakfast, and pack my bags. Every time I went downstairs, something felt different. There's a feeling people get, like someone is watching. I knew everyone was still asleep and none of the neighbors were out yet. Our kitchen only had one window that faced the backyard and the back door. Nothing people could really look through unless they're a creep. So when I went to look around to find out why I had this feeling, I'd be faced with nothing. One Thursday morning, I got up and did my routine. Wake up, change out of my pajamas, go downstairs for breakfast. The feeling followed along like a shadow. As I went to make my food, I had turned to get a plate from the cabinet when out of the corner of my eye I saw something different. Snapping my head in that direction, I laid eyes on him. People sometimes catch glimpses of things out of the corner of their eye only for it to disappear when they look back. This wasn't the case though. I could see his silhouette so clearly outside the back door window, standing behind the tool shed. He had no eyes, but I could feel them train on me. The fear of him disappearing made me frozen in my spot, staring right back. I was never good at staring contests, but it felt like my life depended on this. No burn in my eyes could make me look away. That was until the noise of plates clattering caused me to jump and look away. I dropped the plate when I jumped, noting it was my dad who just was coming down to get some food as well. "Are you okay?" he asked cautiously, raising a bushy eyebrow as he made some toast. "It's as if you saw a ghost." Laughing at his own comment, I placed a crooked smile on my face and laughed dryly. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired, I guess." Every morning after that, the same scene would play out. It's as if a DVD for a movie was scratched. Wake up, change out of my pajamas, go downstairs for breakfast, make sure he doesn't move. He never did for the longest time, but this became part of the routine now and I despised it. While this kept happening, a few months later I had started going to a club at my high school. We'd stay until 4:30 p.m. every Wednesday and I had to take the bus home. By the time I got on the bus, the sun had practically set. During my walk home, it was dark. Since he hadn't moved from his spot until someone came in and distracted me, I was never worried about dealing with him outside of that situation. I'd walk home with headphones in, blasting some random music from my playlist, and maybe dancing along. On that Wednesday, I followed the sidewalk home and quickly stopped halfway there. The feeling was there. The feeling that someone was watching me and I could feel it right behind me. Stupidly confident that it was my mind playing tricks, I turned to look over my shoulder to find him standing there. However, he looked different. His silhouette wasn't clear, more glitched out as he moved towards me. The empty face was now filled with multiple eyes, all staring at me while I hurriedly backed away. If I look away, he'll get me, was the thought that ran through my head. Not looking away felt like the only solution, but it didn't work this time. As soon as he reached me, his hand grabbed my shirt as his body grew larger, towering over me as I leaned back to look up into his eyes. My shaky breathing came to a halt as one of the eyes suddenly turned to a mouth, opening wide and hanging over my body. His mouth suddenly consumed me as I let out a horrified scream, finding myself sitting up on the sidewalk and panting crazily. My eyes scanned the area, head swinging around frantically as I got up. There were no more signs of him, but I could feel him staring at me. Grabbing my backpack from the ground, I hurried home without hesitation. One of the neighbors had heard me scream, only seeing me turn around and fall to the ground. It raised concern, so they headed to our house and told my parents. My dad already had suspicions, catching me staring out the window on our back door every morning. So, he questioned me as if I was in an interrogation. At this time, I had no idea what he was or what I was dealing with, only describing it as best as I could with words. Words aren't my strong suit, so I took out my sketchbook and drew out what I saw. A glitched figure with multiple eyes. This is when I first called him by the name I used to refer to him. No, it's not the Hat Man. I called him it. The only good news was that this didn't happen every time I came home. I'd still see him near the tool shed, just not on my walk home. My parents decided to try and pick me up when they can as well. We all worked as a team to get this fixed. Even though there were still moments I dealt with him on the walk home. Every moment was different. Sometimes he'd just follow me or stare back. I'd prefer those over the majority. Most of the time, he'd attack me. His new multi-eyed figure pushed me down to the ground either to rip out my throat or stab me. It was always a different item too, not just a knife. A glass shard, sharp stick, or even just his hands that morph into something. The one thing that was always the same were his eyes and glitched figure. I can't remember if a month had passed or a year. You lose track of time when you're reliving the same moments over and over again. All that was memorable was seeing a doctor concerning my mental health to try and get medication. The hope was there only to be wiped away again. We'll be starting you on a low dosage of Zoloft, and raise it in about a month. She gave a smile to my mother and I, holding out the information for my prescription. If there are any complications, call me and we'll try to set up an appointment. Do not stop the medication unless another doctor states to do so. Once the medication had arrived at our pharmacy, my mother immediately started giving it to me as the doctor instructed. Who knows how much time passed? It felt like a week when it most likely was another month by the time I'm sitting in her office shaking. The medicine has been making them worse, it's not helping at all. My mother spoke through gritted teeth as her face twisted in rage. And you want to increase it? Sometimes increasing medication works. I think we just need to wait a bit longer as well. No! We are taking them off the medicine. She whipped her head to me and gave a worried frown. It looks like they saw a ghost. They thought the mailman was going to kill them. Scoffing out a dry laugh, she leaned back against the coach and crossed her arms. I had gone to their room to wake them up for school only to find my child curled in the corner of the room in fear. I'm sure it'll get better if we increase the medication and… No, we won't do that. As my mother quickly got up, she grabbed my arm protectively so I stood up with her. In fact, we're not seeing you again. You only caused more pain, so we'll find another doctor. Before the doctor could reply back, I found myself quickly following my mother out the door. Looking over my shoulder, my eyes landed on the nameplate on the doctor's door, and a small smirk found its place on my face. Dr. Goodfriend certainly was not a good friend. Whatever the medication had done to me stuck for a long time. This time, the hallucinations turned to voices I could hear in the corners of the room. I drowned in terror day after day, paranoia following me around like a lost dog. It also kept glitching after me. His face would be everywhere. I could see him on the bus I took, in the window of my lovely neighbor's house, and soon enough in the silhouette standing at the bottom of the basement steps. It's oddly comforting to see him inside the house instead of outside. That was the only area where staring at him kept him in his place. However, it concerned my parents more as time passed. As a few more months passed, the sun would start rising earlier and setting later. I'd try to spend my days in the sunlight, hoping that it wouldn't like that and leave me alone. Although it worked more than I anticipated, the rest of my demons didn't let go as easily. Did you hear me? My brother asked, causing me to snap back into reality. His small hands held out a small video game that was clearly new, making me furrow my eyebrows and tilt my head to the side. No, sorry. Could you repeat yourself? I asked with a soft smile which he gladly returned. That's okay. We got a new game for our DS though. It's the newest Pokemon. He chuckled out, turning the cover of the game to him and admiring it. Oh, did Mox get it for us? I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter as I reached for the kitchen knife. It's sharp enough to get stabbed with. A feminine voice muttered from next to me. Puffing up my cheeks, I tried focusing on my brother's ramble on his new video game. The water Pokemon you can choose at the beginning is… He could easily push you and grab the knife. Followed a masculine voice. The other's still there as well, just not as loud. But I don't like the new grass Pokemon we can. Honestly, I could see him killing you with it. It would be worthless to call for help. The two took turns to talk about the scenario as my grip on the knife tightened. Oh, there's some new legendary. Screaming would just get the rest of the family to come down and help him finish the job. Would that be a better way for you to die? Shaking my head, I tossed the knife on the kitchen counter with a clatter and backed away. Their voices kept bouncing around the room around me, making me feel way too dizzy, but I didn't want to grab onto anything. Turning to face my little brother, I froze slightly at him as he reached out. Are you okay? He asked worryingly as I backed up. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I just nodded a bit before holding out my hand for him to stop. I just need to be alone for a second. Jogging upstairs, the loud slam of my bedroom door shook the house as I sat at my desk. There wasn't anything I could do to stop them from speaking, and it was causing so much frustration to bubble up. Leaning against the desk, I grabbed my sketchbook and pencil, quickly sketching out a few things to help. Putting a face with the voices seemed like the best option, and the noise of my pencil against the paper brought me back to reality. As soon as the pain in my hand was too much, I pushed away from the desk and looked at the mess I made. A page filled with eyes and two faces I could easily name as Andrew and Lexi, the two imaginary friends I made up when I was too lonely and anxious to talk to people. Releasing a pained breath, my body slumped against the chair I sat at and I rubbed my eye. Grumbling slightly at the sound of our family dog barking outside my room, a sudden wave of smell hit my nose, making everything in the world freeze for a bit. My mom must have been preparing dinner, and it smelled delicious. Sitting up, I stared down at the new drawings in my sketchbook before closing it and standing up from my desk. Food would be a good distraction, especially since I could feel the hunger in my stomach. Our dog was still barking outside the room for whatever reason, so I prepared to hush him up as I opened my bedroom door. So many eyes snapped to my direction and I found myself quickly pinned to the wooden floor underneath me. As I panted heavily, my hand automatically reached to grab the wrist that belonged to the hand around my throat. I looked up at it and tried to push myself deeper into the floor, hoping that I could get away from him. My legs lifted up to kick him, but he quickly yanked me up a bit and pulled me close to his horrendous face. While one of his eyes turned into a mouth, my face dropped in defeat as my other hand grabbed his wrist as well, fighting back to get released. Despite knowing how this'll end, I still tried to fight back instead of watching me once again get consumed by him. Replaying my inferno, his mouth hung open over me and snapped shut with a harsh chomp, and I found myself gasping against the ladder that led up to my bunk bed. I must have caused some commotion because my mom was crouched in front of me with a startled look. Seeing her there made me push myself away from her and figure out where I was again. I could hear her quiet comments, the best efforts of comfort from her. The only response I could give was shaking my head repeatedly as she tried to reach for me. Our dog came in and scurried past her, sitting next to me so he could lick my face. The three of us sat there for a few minutes, waiting for me to calm down as my brother and Dad ate their meal downstairs. When my breathing slowed down and I seemed more stable, she gently grabbed my hand and helped me up. "Let's go eat and get a nice rest tonight." Caressing my hair, I looked up at her with tired eyes and nodded slowly. "We'll be seeing the new doctor this weekend, I promise." Leading me down to the dining room table, I sat down and tried my best to focus on the food she had spent making. It was only then when I realized how different my hands looked. There was a small tint of darkness that I could make out, like ink. Rubbing my fingers against the markings I made out, I figured it was from the drawing I had made earlier. Art can be messy at times, especially if you do traditional, but my gut seemed to be saying that that wasn't the entire story. After we all finished our meals, it was time to head to bed. Our dog followed me up the stairs, seeming to still show some worry about me. As I reached the top of the stairs, I stared at the door to my bedroom as the encounter with it played again in my head. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and walked in with our dog close behind. He sniffed around my room intently as I changed for bed and made sure my backpack was ready for school the next morning. Even though our dog doesn't make a mess, I tend to close the door when I go to bed, but decided against it this time. There was a feeling that he knew something I didn't. Dogs have a sixth sense, as people say, and that comforted me. So he found his place in my room as I turned off the lights and climbed up the ladder to my bed. Reaching the top, my breath caught in my throat. There I was, sitting in my bed, staring at me with bright eyes and pitch black skin, similar to it and his appearance. The only difference was that I looked normal with two eyes. With the darkness of my skin, I couldn't tell if there were any other features on my face besides those two. Instead of just staring back, I decided to move forward a bit and sit opposite to my lookalike. There was no way of telling if this thing would do harm to me like it does, so I just stared back. My eyes furrowed as it adjusted to the darkness, and I could see a small line of white where the mouth is supposed to be. As I stared more, the line became more apparent against the silhouette. It wasn't until there was a full-on smile on this thing that I also noticed another eye appear, right on the forehead. My mouth opened to say something, but before I could even do that, they jumped towards me and made me stumble back. Shooting up from my bed, I looked over to my window to see it was now day and I had been asleep. I didn't remember ever laying down and tucking myself in. Looking down, I took note that everything hadn't been like how I remembered, that I definitely did go to bed. But what caught my attention was the fact that the tips of my fingers were now black. I lifted both of my hands to see it more clearly, only to be reminded of the interaction with it and the lookalike I faced last night. It dawned on me that I finally touched it back yesterday when he tackled me. The blood drained from my face as I thought about the lookalike. Maybe the paranormal does exist,